I left my cheating ex on the top of a mountain. My ex cheated on me, so I took him to the top of a high mountain, broke up with him, and left him there. He returned safely. So I've been dating this guy, male 22, for a little over a year now, and despite our differences, it's been a good time. I like working out, I run up and down 14 ers in my spare time, and he's always been a little lazy and out of shape, but he's still attractive, so it's never been a problem. Recently, though, my lady friend was at a pub with some of our other common friends, and, coincidentally and fortunately, spotted him out with the lads as he had said he would. But his ex was there with him, along with several other ladies. She assumed they had just bumped into one other. He had never done anything strange before, but I suppose I've been a little too trusting. She claimed she merely glanced over there now and again, but decided to contact me when they got a little too near. I phoned him because he said he'd just be with the boys and that he'd be home when he came home, and then hung up. I recognized at this point that I hadn't been paying attention to his behavior, not him we actually live with, since I was focused with education and job, and everything I dismissed clicked into place, and I knew he was most likely up with his ex. He always remained out late, ignored my messages and calls for hours, hung out with his friends, but never asked me, and has always been insanely possessive of his phone, claiming he wants to live his own life and it's private, which I should have called him out on, but I suppose I'm much too naive. This was my very first serious relationship. Anyways, he arrived home late, like 3 a.m., and I hadn't heard anything from him or my buddy, but I had been staying up scheming my retribution, since a breakup over this sort of thing isn't enough. I requested that he give me his phone, and when he refused, I told him flatly, then take your and go, since he isn't in the contract, but has been living with me and my roommate and paying my rent since COVID began. I suppose he didn't anticipate I'd say anything like that. I've always been gushing over him and tending to his every need, so surely I'd never be the one to break us up. He handed me his phone, and I had no idea where to begin. Eventually, I discovered a messaging app I'd never heard of, and when I opened it, the first name that up was his ex. They met practically every weekend for or at a restaurant, and most probably up afterwards, as well as emailed each other some photos. I was enraged, but I had already prepared some little retaliation. He stated something like, "I can be better, I never intended to upset you. I'm really sorry, you've been nothing but kind to me," he says, and he adds, "I can change." I've been expecting that, so I responded, "Prove it, come on my trek with me tomorrow. Demonstrate to me that you can alter your habits and do something I like for a change." Unrather manipulative, oops. I've been aiming to tackle a 14,000 FT plus mountain for those who don't reside in Colorado every weekend since the season began, and I've only missed 1 week. I had planned to eventually complete Long's Peak, but he would not have made it to the summit, so we chose a gentler route instead. Hiking up, he was a jerk, and we had to stop approximately every 30 minutes for him, making the 8-hour trek to the peak quite monotonous. He was obviously trying to be kinder and sweeter than he had been, but it was sort of sad at that point, and I knew I'd never forgive a cheater. When we arrived at the top, he sat down right away and drank the remainder of his water, despite my warning that he'd surely need it for the descent. I took some necessary photographs, since this was still something I'd never done before, kissed him because gosh those lips still hurt, and stated we're officially over. Before turning to start my trek down, he was fatigued and couldn't keep up for long after we got back on the path, but he was talking a lot of that I mainly tuned out, but I overheard him say, "Slow down, you're just going to have to wait in the vehicle," to which I replied, "Just phone a buddy, or better yet your ex." I'm writing this in the vehicle right now, and because I don't have reception, I'm hoping it reaches Reddit before I get home. It was a long trip, so I doubt he'll be home for a while. He does have reception, and there's a water fountain at the trailhead. I made sure I'm not a jerk. I'm not sure what will happen when he arrives to retrieve his belongings, or where he'll go after that, but I'll update this if anything exciting occurs. Despite everything, I'm really pleased. Update. I wasn't going to write this for a while until all of his belongings were taken out, but I'd want to address all of the remarks about his health and the entire kicking him out scenario. People will probably be unhappy since it's not that fascinating and I didn't contribute much to the vengeance, but it seems that this is required. To all the folks sharing hiking horror tales and labeling me insane, here's some information on my ex. He grew up in Canada with an incredibly outdoorsy family who taught him basic survival skills and pushed him on walks as a youngster. We've gone camping and snowboarding together. I made certain that his pack would be sufficient in the event that he became disoriented. He had a survival beacon, which I used for backcountry skiing, paracord, a knife, a compass, a first aid kit, an emergency blanket, a whistle, bear spray, a flashlight, a ferro rod, maybe 3 or 4 Cliff Bars remaining, correctly layered clothes, and possibly more things I forgot. He is no slacker when it comes to the woods, and he can follow a track that was incredibly, at least to me, extensively frequented the day before. He was dropped off by a buddy and, true to form, did not feel like shifting all of his junk, which was good since it had been a long day. He slept on the sofa, and I cleared all his belongings from my room last night. I was going to assist him bring all of his minor stuff downstairs, since he's well settled in, but his ex arrived up to help him pack, so now I'm just in my room writing this. We just had a short conversation last night, since I was curious about, well, everything. He was outraged, but I suppose he was too exhausted to express himself, yelling, not physical. He said that he had been behind a large party for some time, keeping up with their speed until he hit tree line, at which point he lost sight of them. He estimates that it took him roughly 5 hours to get down, but he is terrible at predicting time, so it may have taken him less or more time. People who are concerned about him running out of daylight should note that many 14ers are climbed first thing in the morning, and we started at 4:30 a.m. and finished at 12:15 p.m., giving him plenty of time to get out before nightfall. Furthermore, since it was my first and only post, I have no idea when it went live. I had no notification that it had done so while I was traveling or when I arrived at my destination, and I awoke to find a slew of comments waiting for me. He's moving in with his ex-girlfriend and hasn't said anything about my evicting him in violation of the law, which I doubt he cares about. Yes, he gets correspondence from this location, but I have my doubts that he feels he has a legal case, if he even does. Overall, everything went well, and I'll never forget the look on his face as he reached the summit. Story 2. My married neighbor is flirting with me and I'm tempted. I'm a 26-year-old male who has just moved for a new career opportunity. The couple across the hall from me is a married couple in their mid-30s or something, and they have a kid. I moved into this building with just 4 apartments on each floor, and they live immediately across the hall from me. My coworker's wife is this really attractive, mature-looking girl, and I'd been conversing with her anytime we happened to pass one other in the hallway for the past 2 weeks. I had a little romantic interest in her, but it was nothing more than a passing fancy. She'd been acting a little flirty in the preceding few days, which I admit was both exhilarating and mystifying at the same time, but I didn't take any of it seriously at all. Today, we were talking about the holidays and other things. It was stated to me that her husband was required to go to his place of employment, and I indicated that I may continue to work from home. Her next statement crossed a line when she told me I could come over to her apartment one day after New Year's if I felt like it, and she immediately gave me a look that made me gasp for air for a split second before continuing. And I just realized that her kid will be at school after New Year's, so she's truly inviting me over to her apartment, where we'll have the place to ourselves. Now, I'll admit that the offer has me feeling rather intrigued. I know you'll be critical of me for it, but please accept my sincere apologies. This is the first time I've ever had such a lovely woman express an interest in me. We're in India, and it seems she was married via an arranged marriage, which is rather common here. I get the idea she's unsatisfied with her marriage. A little part of me is disappointed, but the bulk of me is willing to go along with whatever this is if it is also what she wants. Do you have any previous experience dealing with anything similar to this?